Hi, and welcome to Chapter 2 of my biography, My Navy BC Life Before Christ. On January 13th, 1958, I was sworn into the United States Navy in San Francisco, California. We all spent the night in a San Francisco hotel, courtesy of Uncle Sam. Then we had breakfast the next morning with food tickets, courtesy of Uncle Sam. Then we were bused to the then very small San Francisco International Airport and flown to San Diego. Anything you may have seen, an officer and a gentleman, steel jacket, these various other Hollywood depictions of what you go through with boot camp, does not hold a candle to the stark reality of coming face to face with the reality that you are best scum, at worst you're a maggot, and that chief barking orders laced with obscenities now holds absolute sway over every aspect of your life. I will not dwell on details of my boot camp experience, except to simply say that as a young man who had been making my own wages from 12 years old on and having bought my own car at 15, this kid did not take authoritarianism very well, especially coming from recruit petty officers who had been in the same amount of time as myself and got swell-headed over being selected to fill a position. And being a fighter as well as a lover, by the way, my shipmates voted me one of the 3 toughest guys in our company, well, that simply compounded the problem. As a result, by the time Recruit Company 034 graduated, I had 48 regimental reports on me. It nearly caused me to be held over and not graduate my company. But by God's, unknown to me at that time, grace, I skimmed by and graduated. My first 8 years in the Navy drew me deeper and deeper into alcoholism and nicotine addiction. I spent my first 3 years as a bosun mate seaman, sailing mainly over the Caribbean on USS Kleinsmith, APD 134, and seeing how much rum I could consume in each port. On June 26, 1960, I married Myrna, my school sweetheart. The next part I share not to boast, but just to show what an absolute jerk I was in my BC days. While Myrna was pregnant with our first child, I had an affair with her best friend. Yep. In October of that year, the opportunity presented itself and I re-enlisted early for conversion to missile technician. But they were short-handed in deck, and the deck officer got the operations officer, who was the security officer, to hold up my clearance request. So off I went with the ship to Westpac for 6 months of fun and games patrolling off Vietnam on Yankee Station in the South China Sea. And Yankee Station was where we were on July 2nd, 1962, when this Red Cross telegram arrived via radio saying, "Hi, Daddy, just arrived, weighing 7 pounds 2 ounces and measuring 21 inches long, Ralph III." So when I found out that the ops officer was holding on my paperwork, I complained to the captain, who we had a lot of mutual friends, and we developed some kind of a friendship. You can't call it that with your captain, but we did. And so he made the ops officer, she had sent my papers in by radio, so that I could get there, manage to get home in time to see my son at 2 weeks old, Lord. By the way, both officers were put in hack. That means they were confined to quarters except for their meals and their duties. They couldn't go ashore or anything. But anyway, so I got to California and I loaded my little family into a 4-year-old Plymouth station wagon, and off we went to Virginia Beach, Virginia, where I attended Guided Missile A School at the base at Dam Neck, Virginia. By the way, that would be my home 2 more times later on 2 more occasions. At Dam Neck, we learned basic and advanced electronics, the newly emerging transistor technology, and radar special circuits and hydraulics. After graduation, my class was sent to regular sea school in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, which translated our basic knowledge into specific applications for the air-breathing submarine-launched Regulus missile. Only pre-World War II military housing was available to lower-ranked military personnel, so me, Myrna, and little Ralph moved into it and spent the next year fighting the cockroaches to keep them under control. Upon graduation, my duty station was GMU 10, Guided Missile Unit 10, in Pearl Harbor. It was during this time that God saved my life 2 more times as I took 110 volts across my heart on 2 different occasions thanks to an ignorant shipmate. Several months later, I made Petty Officer 3rd, and we moved into the much newer housing nearer to the base. On June 22nd, 1963, my son Byron arrived at Tripper Army Hospital on Oahu. We really only wanted 1 boy and 1 girl, but now we had 2 boys. Perhaps we should start a basketball team. Still being lost as Hogan's goat, I had an affair this time with Myrna's new best friend. This nearly ended my marriage and resulted in a child whom I've never been able to track down. Upon completion of that tour, the Navy transferred me to Guided Missile Unit 10 on the Bonham Detachment on Kauai, where I spent the next 18 months of my Navy career. It was on Kauai that God saved my life a fifth time. I got caught in a weird riptide, weird in that it was both going out to sea and ripping across the beach at the same time. And yes, my life passed before me, and yes, I thought I was for sure I was a goner. It was also there on July 10th, 1985, that my daughter Leilani Lynn arrived at Waimea Hospital, Waimea, Kauai. No more thoughts of a basketball team, unless perhaps a basketball team and cheerleaders. Maybe we'd have 7 or more. Anyway, let me fast forward to 1967, where my pre-salvation story really begins. 7 of us had graduated the 10-week computer programming school, required as a prerequisite for the 6-month Polaris A3 missile conversion school we were to attend again at Dam Neck, Virginia. Now we were about to graduate from that Polaris school. My orders were for the USS Simon Lake AS-34 stationed in the Holy Loch in Scotland off the Firth of Clyde. By this time, Myrna and I had 3 children, of course. Ralph III was 6, Byron was 4, and Leilani was 2. And we were a little concerned as we really needed 3 bedrooms, which was almost unheard of in Scotland unless you bought a house, which was nearly impossible for Yanks. And rentals were all just 1 and 2 bedroom. The Navy gave families up to 90 days TLA, temporary lodging allowance, above and beyond our normal housing allowance, to cover the very expensive temporary lodging, which often was hotels. So one afternoon I came home from school, and lo and behold, my wife says, the neighbors loaned us a game. And what do my wondering eyes did appear? And a Ouija board complete with demons in gear. That night after we put the kids to bed, we set up the game board and we started playing around with it. Even though we barely touched the plants, it fairly flew around the board answering our questions. But finally I said, you know what? Even though we're barely touching the plants, we're asking it questions that we know the answers to, and we may be subconsciously influencing the answers to questions we already know. So I asked the Ouija board, I said, will we have trouble finding a house? Ouija said no. Will we find a house before our TLA runs out? Ouija said yes. How many bedrooms will it have? Ouija said 3. So with that, we put the board away, and the next day we gave it back to our neighbors with a thank you, and we never played with an Ouija board again. But I filed those answers away in my memory. Now, Myrna and the children came to Scotland about 2 weeks after me, as she was from Canada and there was a little difficulty getting her U.S. passport. But the good thing was it allowed me to secure a cute, cozy little cottage, which did not eat up much of our TLA, and also our TLA did not start until they arrived. So we began pursuing every lead we could, searching for a house. And every lead turned out to be a dead end. We just could not find anything that was more than 1 or 2 bedrooms. First month, nothing. Second month, nothing. By the beginning of the third week of the third month, the last week of the third month, I was ready to apply for my first month's extension, and thinking so much for that Ouija board, a bunch of hooey. But we ended up handling missiles late, and I missed the bus. So I caught a taxi, and when I got in the taxi driver and I entered into a conversation, and he asked, have you found a house yet? I said, no, I have to apply for TLA extension this week. He said, let me talk to my sister. She owns the flat we grew up in and has not wanted to rent it since our mom passed away 7 years ago. Let me see if she's willing to rent it yet. The next day he watched for me to come off the pier, and when I got off the Liberty boat, and he said, get in and let me take you to meet my sister Donna at the flat. Now this was a second floor, 3-bedroom flat. What did Ouija say? 3 bedrooms, 3-bedroom flat, right on the waterfront of Nanoon on a main bus route. Now let me show you how Satan works. Let me assure you first of 2 things. Satan absolutely cannot read minds, nor can he see the future. But what he did was when their mom passed away, he figured one day he might just have a use for that flat. And he or one of his demon servants whispered in Donna's ear, "Oh, you cannot bear to see anyone else living in your mother's flat. Do not rent it." So I gathered dust for 7 years, along with the downstairs business they had. They were Italians. Their mother and father had come from Italy, and they had an Italian restaurant on the first floor. The flat they grew up on the third floor, and a small flat on the third floor that the brother lived in with his wife and son. And so she never did rent out. She never did reopen the restaurant. But here's what the demon whispered in her: You've mourned for your mother long enough. You need the money. Go ahead and rent it. So, you know, here's what Satan said: aha, this is who I've been waiting for. So we rent the apartment. It's all we wanted. Voila, I was hooked. I spent the next 5 years in the occult as a result of the Ouija board. And it's 100% accurate predictions. The second thing that happened in Scotland was I began learning and eventually assisting in teaching the children's class in Aikido. So in addition to my growing interest in the occult, I was also getting involved in Zen philosophy. A crazy mixture, huh? Mormonism for the first 16 years of my life, and now witchcraft and Zen philosophy, and still I'm drowning it all liberally in alcohol and nicotine. In fact, although I did not realize it until after I got saved, I was a full-blown alcoholic. I had followed right in the part of my dad's footsteps that I always swore I never would. When I got to Scotland, I couldn't stand the taste of gin. 3 years later, I would drink it straight. Yeah. Less than half jokingly, my drinking buddy Gary and I used to tell people when they'd say we're alcoholics, we'd say, nah, alcoholics have to go to meetings and that uses up valuable drinking time. We're just plain drunks. In fact, Gary used to tell people who missed one of our parties we'd go to, yeah, it was a great party. We poured Ralph into his guitar case and Myrna carried him home. Yep. I used to pick and sing at the parties, and I got so drunk sometimes I didn't know how I made it home. It all seemed pretty funny at the time, but inside I was aching for something more real. I remember it was about 1969 I began telling people, of course based on my Mormon understanding, yeah, one of these days I need to clean up my act. I meant stop drinking and smoking and come back to Jesus. I meant come back to the Mormon church because I didn't know Jesus. I knew their Jesus who, was a born twin of Lucifer and a man that became God rather than God who made himself man for man's sake. But another thing that happened in 1969 that got my attention, one night I woke from a horrible nightmare and I was wringing wet with sweat. My dream was that my family and I were in a car driving up a hill when suddenly over the hill ahead of us there was a blinding flash and a mushroom cloud and we went into absolute darkness. I mean, it was oblivion. I could no longer see or hear my family and I knew I was in hell. Now, it's as vivid now as it was then, but at that time, it took me 6 months to drink it out of my mind, and then I absolutely, totally forgot it, until, as we will hear later, God brought it back to my memory 3 years later. So, shortly it's on to the chapter for my conversion, but before we close this chapter, remember I told you that in 1969, I had to rethink my favorite adage, God watches over little children and drunken sailors. Well, another very good drinking buddy of mine, Bill Bronner, who was on leave in the U.S. and we got word that one night that he was returning from a drunken orgy to his parents' home in Pittsburgh. He ran off the Pennsylvania Pike and was killed instantly. Oh, life of the party, Bill gone. Now, along with my growing feeling of emptiness, was the shocking reality that I was actually not really invincible. While my drinking was still growing more and more severe, many nights I fell asleep watching TV after consuming a pitcher or two of very dry martinis. When I say very dry, I mean pour in the gin and hope someone opened a bottle of vermouth somewhere in the neighborhood. One very important point to be revisited in the next chapter was in 1968, I broke my left kneecap playing basketball. Me and a teammate were both looking over opposite shoulders while breaking down court. We ran into each other, resulting in my coming down on my left kneecap, splitting my kneecap horizontally into two halves. You could take the top and the bottom, move them opposite directions. The good news was that a nerve was blocked and I had no feeling in that knee. The ship's doc said that was good because there was nothing they could do for it. But we shall visit that again later in the next chapter. So thank you very much for coming and watching chapter 2. God bless you, and I hope you'll return for subsequent chapters. Have a great day.